you'll probably come out of turf school starting as an assistant somewhere, or you might get into a place where you get into the very low minors in baseball, certainly. The single A clubs as a head groundskeeper. But typically you'll get in as an assistant or as a crew member somewhere on an internship, and then eventually when you graduate, you'll get hired on as an assistant somewhere. And then you'll work your way up to head groundskeeper, and you can go from the lower levels of being a head groundskeeper up to the upper levels of being a head groundskeeper. During the 90s, there was a ton of moving around of people. Every year there was a lot of openings, and a lot of people moved to work their way up that ladder. And then when we got to in 2008, when we had the big economy dump, suddenly nobody moved. Everybody stayed in their jobs, and it's only been within recent years that you're seeing a lot of moving around again finally. And it's important. We've seen a big drop off in students in the turf schools around the country, and we theorize that a lot of it's because a lot of kids don't even know that this is a profession you can have. But the big fear is that there's a lot of people like my age in the industry who are getting ready to retire, and there's not enough people in line to fill all those job openings that are going to occur. So the big fear is to make sure we get people in these turf schools, get them educated, and get them ready to go to take on managing these facilities.
All right, and then the last one, do you have any advice for someone trying to get into this career?
Well, yes, I do actually, and some of it has to do with the big concerns of those who are students, that you don't need to have a bachelor's degree to get these jobs. There's a lot of great 2-year degrees out there now that doesn't require as much cost to get a 2-year degree will certainly get you the job. 4-year degree is certainly better, but you don't need to spend that kind of money. And if you're going to go 4-year degree, these days, to be fiscally responsible for yourself, you're better off taking your basic courses those first 2 years, someplace cheap like a Madison Area Technical College or some other smaller school, and then just come in for your last 2 years at the main turf schools. I know I'm talking with Doug Soldat from the University of Wisconsin, who runs the turf program here. When my son was in the process of getting into the turf program, he said, the majority of my students anymore don't come for 4 years to Wisconsin. They're transferring in from another school where they've gotten their basics out of the way. The other thing to take a look at is there's more and more schools that are also putting their program online. And that's what my son ended up doing, actually. He went to the Penn State online program. So he was able to work full-time during the day and take his schooling at night and in fact, he just got his degree this past summer in turf, and now he's working in golf out in Connecticut. But that's another alternative. So there's a lot of different venues that you can go to for this. But again, you don't have to have a degree. There's a lot of guys in professional sports who are up at the higher level who don't have a turf degree. They started out as a crew member years ago, working somewhere, and they worked their way up just gaining the knowledge on the street. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. But, to do that way, to go on the street, it's harder now because there's a lot more competition with the educated kids. You got to be a real go-getter, and you got to be really hungry to learn everything you can and soak up as much as you can. So that's where the STMA becomes critical, because that's going to be your educational end, besides wherever you work. But if I'm pushing somebody into it, typically I'll tell them, I think the online degrees are nice. Penn State has one of the best, where my son went through, but they're certainly not the only one. Some of the 2-year degrees are fantastic and will get you in there, and then from there, again, if you're a real go-getter and you have a lot of common sense and you have a lot of drive, you can get there without going all the way to the 4-year degree and making that kind of financial I don't know what you want to call it, dive,
Yeah. Yeah.
dive into it. But it also helps if you've got a good mentor who you find and who can help guide you through it. That's one of the things I love to do with kids. I've run a couple kids through Madison, West Madison Little League, one of which was now one of the assistants at Pittsburgh for the Pirates at their ballpark. So I've had a couple kids go through there and be very successful going into the turf industry so far. So that's always great to see. And again, they didn't really know that was a profession.
Yeah.
I guess they just think somebody comes walking in 2 hours before game time, picks up a mower, walks the field and mows it,
Yeah.
puts a little paint on, and that's it. But there's a lot more to it than that.
Mhm.
And it's way more technical now than when I got into the industry back in '85. Way more technical, and so it's important that we get these kids educated and ready to go to take over us old folks.
All right, that's all.